Hello and welcome to Say in the City. My name is SatC, and today we are breaking down the 11th episode of season 1 of Sex in the City. The Drought was directed by Matthew Harrison, who will also direct the next episode. His career has been a bit sporadic. I'm not sure if he's still very active in Hollywood, aside from the annual Film Crash Film Festival in LA. The Drought was written by Michael Patrick King and Michael Green, who will go on to write for Smallville, Everwood, and Heroes, before transitioning to film with 2017's Logan, Alien Covenant, Blade Runner 2049, and Murder on the Orient Express, and its 2022 sequel, Death on the Nile. His most recent credits are writing the screenplay for 2023's A Haunting in Venice and creating the Netflix animated series Blue Eye Samurai in 2023. So this writing assignment is a little outside his wheelhouse, but let's come back to that later. We open the episode with a traditional Carrie voiceover as she tells us New York City is all about sex, people getting it, people trying to get it, and people who can't get it. No wonder the city never sleeps, it's too busy trying to get laid. But if you ever actually do manage to get someone in bed, the real fun begins. So we see a bunch of people in a bar, all mingling and being young and single. This kind of looks like it might be Chaos from episode 1, but that's mostly just the lighting and ambiance. We go from this rowdy bunch to Carrie and Big eating ice cream in bed while he reads Truman by David McCullough. This book is the 1992 biography of President Harry S. Truman. It actually won the 1993 Pulitzer Prize and was made into an Emmy-winning HBO movie in 1995, starring Gary Sinise. As the two cuddle and just make me sick, Carrie continues, after sleeping together for many weeks, Mr. Big and I had gotten comfortable enough to really sleep together. It was nice. It was the way I'd always dreamed it could be. But all things must come to an end, and in the morning, it happens.
Becky, cut the cheese.
Sarah Jessica Parker actually referenced this scene in Kiss and Tell. When Michael Patrick King pitched me the story about Carrie farting in bed, I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to do it. Then I went and told my agent the story, and she was laughing so hard that I thought, I'll do it. When I was covered up with the blanket, I accidentally ran into the door, but we kept the shot. There was a lot of politicking for who was going to make the actual sound, and it ended up being Joe Dolly. His name is Joe Donahue, but I call him Joe Dolly. He is a third or fourth generation Dolly grip and an incredibly bright, amazing young man. The scene took many takes because I kept laughing and I was really embarrassed. SJP running into the door is why we get this genuine laugh from Chris Noth here. She really hit everything on her way to the door. Obviously, Carrie is mortified, so she leaves his apartment as quickly as she can. One thing I want to point out real quick is that Big's apartment has changed to A, but I'll come back to this later. She farts again as she works, which just exacerbates her mortification. We see her the next day at Big's when she tells us, I realized how childish I was behaving. I decided to stop avoiding the situation and take the grown-up approach, complete and utter denial. She's wearing a Todd Oldham silk top when she asks Big if he wants to go to the new Goya exhibit at the Met. There was no Goya exhibit at the Met in 1998, but that's okay. There was also no Balzac. Francisco Goya was a Spanish artist who was probably the most important Spanish painter until Picasso did his thing. He's incredibly influential even today. Some of my favorites of his are the Majas, which include La Maja Desnuda, one of the first obscene female nudes in Western art, and his series of etchings known as the Disasters of War, as well as, of course, Saturn devouring his son, which still freaks people out, so I love it. She also says that she wants to stop by the Renoirs because she loves him. Pierre-Auguste Renoir was a French artist who, along with Claude Monet, was one of the pioneers of Impressionism. The Met doesn't have any of his most famous paintings in its permanent collection, but there are some really beautiful examples of his post-Impressionism style, not to be confused with the post-Impressionism movement that he helped inspire. Anyway, Big uses this opportunity to remind her of the incident by pranking her with a whoopee cushion, a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Okay, again, not that serious, but actually, let's dissect this moment later. That night, Carrie puts on, I'm pretty sure, the only lingerie we'll see her in until season 5. Big tells her he's too tired and just wants to sleep. She says, that was the first night we slept together and didn't make love. As we transition to Carrie and Miranda getting manis together, Carrie continues, By the middle of the week, it was 3 times in a row, and I was beginning to worry. Miranda tells her that 3 times is not as big a deal as her 3 months, which brings us to one of my favorite moments.
Now would be a good time to wipe that horrified look off your face.
Carrie says she didn't know, which isn't technically true, depending on what the timeline of the season actually is, since Miranda did allude to a dry spell in episode 9. Anyway, Miranda says, of course Carrie didn't know. You've been having sex. I've been at Blockbuster renting videos. It's tragic. I'm like 2 rentals away from a free pound of gummy bears. Before we move on, let's talk about some things I noticed in this scene. First, they're getting their nails done at Nails Noble, which used to be at 1486 3rd Avenue on the Upper East Side. It's now Levain Bakery. Also, we can see behind the women another sign for the AIDS Walk. We saw the same sign in Lava in episode 9. The 10K Walkathon was held on May 17th in 1998 in Central Park, and it benefited the gay men's health crisis. Sponsors included Time Warner Inc. and Pfizer, which we'll get to. I'll talk more about Blockbuster later, so let's move along. Carrie wins the Sensitive Friend Award by telling Miranda not doing it when you're with someone means much more than not doing it when you're not with someone. But Carrie finally has to admit that she farted in front of Big, which leads to a bit of a breakdown. And we're no longer having sex, and he thinks of me as one of the boys, and I'm going to have to move to another city where the shame of this won't follow me. Miranda reminds her that she's human, and it's okay. Unfortunately, the breakdown continues. I don't want him to know that. I mean, he's this perfect guy. You know, he walks around his perfect apartment with his perfect suit, and he's just perfect, 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 perfect. And I'm the girl who farts. No wonder we're not having sex. Miranda correctly calls her insane and tells her this is normal. She asks if it's normal to be in the same bed and not do it. And okay, I'm going to save my commentary until later, but this does lead us to the episode Quandary. Carrie says there are 1.3 million single men in New York, 1.8 million single women. And of these more than 3 million people, about 21 think they are having enough sex. How often is normal? We get the typing screen back, thank goodness. I've missed it dearly. Unfortunately, we also get the interviews back. Real quick though, I hope this shot of the women walking looks familiar because we're exactly where we were in the pilot episode on Park Avenue South between East 21st and East 20th Streets. I think this is probably some B-roll from the pilot shot because some of the women are in both. This woman specifically. After the interviews, we find Carrie doing yoga with Samantha. Wait, can we consider just lying on the floor yoga? Anyway, Sam tells her normal is the halfway point between what you want and what you can get. I think this is actually a healthy way to approach this idea of normal. And that's where the healthy opinions stop for our dear Samantha for this episode. Carrie tells Samantha about the fart and echoes Miranda's sensibility. She's human. Samantha says, no, honey, you're a woman, and men don't like women to be human. We aren't supposed to fart, douche, use tampons, or have hair in places we shouldn't. I mean, hell, a guy once broke up with me because I missed a bikini wax. So I'm not going to comment on this for this breakdown, but I do want to mention that the bikini wax will come up again for Samantha in a later episode. Obviously, this all freaks Carrie out again, but Samantha reassures her, just go over there and fuck his brains out, and he'll forget all about it. Men aren't that complicated. They're kind of like plants. She's not wrong. Sam then hits on the yoga instructor, and they go to a health food restaurant around the corner that Carrie says is called Tofu or Not Tofu. And I couldn't find if this restaurant actually existed, but if it did, no wonder it closed. That's a stupid fucking name. But I do think a slightly different version would be hot. Tufa or not Tufa. We find out that Yoga Guy's name is Siddhartha. Siddhartha is played by Anthony DeSando, who I know best as Pino from Kiss Me Guido, but he's been in a few things since this role. He's wearing a Perry Ellis America silver metallic anorak jacket, but this one might be custom since it says Regal Club and not Perry Ellis below America. Samantha is wearing a Nike tennis jacket, looking like an Olympian. Sam tries to get Siddhartha up to her apartment, but he reveals that he's celibate. He says, I practice brahmacharya, tantric celibacy. I gave up sex 3 years ago. So let's talk about it because we have a lot to unpack with Sid here. First, while brahmacharya does include sexual restraint, it's not just about celibacy. Like most Indian religious concepts, it's meant to be all-encompassing for the spirit, which means striving toward a passionless state. That also means removing any desire for material things. And yes, that is a Perry Ellis jacket he's wearing. Next, let's talk about the name Siddhartha. So let's be frank, this white boy was not named Siddhartha at birth. For some reason, yoga just breeds people like this. I don't want to get into how we in the US have appropriated yoga to just be about physical fitness, but this fucker taking the name Siddhartha, which, while a still popular name in India, is the given name of the Buddha. Maybe he knows that, or maybe he read the 1922 novel Siddhartha, an Indian novel by the German author Hermann Hesse. Anyway, let's not get too deep into it because I'm just going to offend a lot of people. I'll just finish this off with this guy would be so into crypto. As someone who's obviously better than all of us, Sid pretends like he's left his ego behind because where I am now is so much better than sex. Think about really good foreplay. Your sexual energy is just starting to awaken. Now imagine a 3-year foreplay where all that sexual energy is coursing through your body, but it never gets released. It just recycles, builds, rises until your entire being is humming with that electric sexual energy. Again, this is all about sex to him, so he does not practice Brahmacharya. Okay, let's move on. Carrie tells us, the next night when I met Charlotte for dinner, I had reached my own transcendental state, pure Mr. Big obsession. And I love how she thinks the obsession started here, but okay. She starts to tell Charlotte that she farted, but can't, saying, I couldn't bring myself to tell her. I was afraid she'd go spontaneously deaf. Charlotte tells her, people put too much emphasis on the importance of sex. It's not the most important thing in a relationship. Take Kevin and I, for example. We've been going out for weeks, and we still haven't done it. I mean, we touch and cuddle, but he's sweet, and he respects my boundaries. And I like it. It makes it special. Oh, Char. As always, let's put a pin in this. Her new beau walks up as Carrie tells us, meeting a friend's new boyfriend for the first time is always a little tense. What if you don't like him? What if he doesn't like you? What if you've already slept with him? Charlotte recognizes that they know each other, which prompts her to extract some information from Carrie, saying, Carrie, we don't have time for diplomacy. Just tell me. Carrie tells her he's a sex maniac, and that's why they broke up. Again, pin. Kevin is played by David Lee Russick, who also played Frank Kalfa in the second season of Catwalk and Chip Rayburn in Another World, both before this role. He's been fairly active on television after this role, but nothing as substantial as the earlier roles. By the way, only Carrie can make a dinner meant to be about Charlotte, about her. It's beautiful to watch, honestly. For some reason, Charlotte thinks she's changed him, so she decides tonight is the night when two become one. I'm also a bit upset that we didn't get to see the rest of the dinner, but we'll see a similar situation in season 3, so we can wait until then. Charlotte takes Kevin up to her bedroom, where she finds out why he's been so patient. He tells her that was before. Prozac. Yeah, I used to be such a mess, Mr. Moodswig. It's a total lifesaver. The only downside is it takes all the air out of my tires. After a while, it's kind of like a taffy pull. So, Prozac. Prozac is one of the brand names for fluoxetine, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, SSRI class antidepressant medication invented by Eli Lilly and Company in 1972. Its main competitor is Zoloft, which is a Pfizer medication, which, if I put on my conspiracy hat, is why HBO and Time Warner chose to name drop Prozac, since both medications do lead to decreased libido, but we saw that Pfizer was also a sponsor of the AIDS walk. Coincidence? Probably, but should we trust corporations? Absolutely not. Anyway, Charlotte still thinks she saved him, so she says, that's okay, don't worry about it. He tells her that he doesn't worry about anything anymore and asks if she wants to watch a movie. He grabs a Blockbuster rental box off of her nightstand. So, did she have that? Did he bring it with him? Again, more on Blockbuster in a moment. For some reason, Carrie is fretting about going over to Biggs after the dinner. We'll find out why I say for some reason here soon. In the midst of her pacing, she looks over and there they were, my new neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Get It On. A couple so obviously into each other, there's only one thing to do. Watch. Then something wonderful happened. My desire overcame my fear. So Carrie calls Big to see if she can go over, and he agrees. So yeah, they didn't have plans, so she didn't need to be pacing, but let's go with it. The less realistic thing here is Carrie being able to see all the way across the street, and this clearly into her neighbor's apartment. We already know that this window doesn't face an alleyway, but again, let's put a pin in it for now. Meanwhile, Samantha was across town getting scammed by a crypto bro. I'm sorry. I mean, she starts her new spiritual journey. I will admit though, she looks amazing in this scene. Carrie goes to Biggs, telling us, I showed up at his apartment feeling sexy and confident, wearing my secret weapon skirt that really hugged my hips. I was ready to go. He didn't have a prayer. Oh no. So, Ret to Go comes from a sketch on In Living Color in which Jamie Foxx, in drag as Wanda Wayne, goes on a blind date with one of my 90s crushes, Tommy Davidson. So why would Carrie use this reference? Well, she technically used it in the wrong context, so that doesn't help. But the sketch was around 5 years old at the time, so it's an interesting choice. In terms of context, I'm guessing Carrie thinks Ret to Go means being the worst possible house guest during a sports. This is full cringe. I can't look away, and I love it. Big is finally like, what the fuck? Carrie shouts, well, maybe I'm not perfect. Maybe I don't fit into your perfect, life with your perfect apartment and your perfect pay-per-view fight. Maybe I should leave. So we got a preview of this in Secret Sex, but she actually leaves this time. By the way, with no champagne or vodka involved. She says, I stood there and waited for the obligatory, he's coming to stop me 10 seconds. He didn't. By the time I got home, I was sure he'd left an apology on my voicemail. He didn't leave a voicemail. He didn't even know what happened. Real quick, his apartment is not only he's on the other side of the hallway than before. It's also a totally different vibe than the last time we saw this hallway. Carrie tells us that she couldn't sleep and that Samantha almost masturbated, but stopped herself. In the daytime, Miranda goes to return a documentary on the Nuremberg trial, which I think everyone should watch in 2025. She's verbally harassed by a construction worker because this was completely acceptable and way too normal in the 90s. In order to keep herself busy, Carrie repaints her kitchen, which is a choice, but also exactly how many days has she been painting? There's no tape anywhere. She is draping previously painted cabinets. So this has been going on for days. Also, I need the David Bowie shirt that Carrie wears while she's painting. This is when Miranda shows up to complain about the extra week of being an incel. And can we just applaud how Miranda talks about it instead of trying to, murder people? Anyway, Miranda finally shows Carrie some tough love, telling her it's not the fucking fart. Carrie responds with 2 important points. First, she thinks she might be in love. Second, she's worried about not being perfect. Unfortunately, spoiler alert, some of her fears will prove to be all too valid, but Miranda asks her, when did you get so obsessed with being perfect? And this is such a good question for Miranda to ask for all of us, really. Keep in mind that up until this point, we've had some insight into Carrie's relationship with Mr. Big, but you could argue that it's been glimpses into Carrie's reactions to him. So mostly downs and not a lot of ups. He sucks at being in relationships of all kinds. He used to be married, he never wants to get married again, and now apparently he's funny. Because Carrie has been mostly reacting to him, we haven't seen a lot of what their relationship is actually like when she is content in their relationship. We'll get more into this later, but this idea of the unseen Carrie sets up their entire relationship moving forward. Carrie says, I don't know, it's something about him. I mean, you should see me around him. I'm not like me. I'm like together Carrie. I wear little outfits. Sexy Carrie and casual Carrie. Sometimes I catch myself actually posing. It's exhausting. Again, I'm single, but we've all been there. We've all done things to fit into what we think our partner wants from us, for better or worse. Because this is such a common trope, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this right now, but I do appreciate that Miranda tries to knock some common sense into her by saying, well then stop. Why don't you show him some more of this Carrie? She's pretty great. In an alternate universe, she does. He loves her. They live happily ever after. And Sex and the City is a miniseries instead of the 6 seasons we love so much. So let's remind ourselves that we're following a character who is deeply flawed and exhausted by trying to be perfect and has already admitted that she's both of those things. Before they can finish the important conversation, though, Miranda gets distracted by the new neighbors, just as Carrie did. As Carrie tells us, when a show is good, word gets around. So all of the girls show up to watch the 3 o'clock matinee. I love that they're eating the free pound of gummy bears. So apparently Miranda got at least her second rental. While this is one of my favorite ensemble scenes, not a lot happens here. Sam is obviously very frustrated, and so is Charlotte, but Charlotte thinks she can get on top of it. No pun intended. Kind of. But just to revisit how weird it is that all of a sudden Carrie's neighbors across the way are so close. My neighbors across the way are close, but not this close. I work relatively close to the window that overlooks theirs, and I would be mortified if I looked up and was looking directly into my neighbor's bedroom. My blinds would not be up with my desk right at the window. I have enough faith in Carrie to know that her apartment setup would be very different if she shared an alley outside that window. Not to mention her bed. We did also get street views of outside this window earlier in the season, even if it's technically different now. We also got that weird glimpse outside her window in episode 4. Anyway, the group finally parts, and we don't know if Charlotte ever knows about the fart. I guess we can assume she doesn't, yet again demonstrating how Carrie keeps certain information from Charlotte for her protection. That brings us to all of the girls trying to fix their droughts. First, Miranda makes her way back to Blockbuster, which has fun little details. First, we see a poster for The Full Monty, an Oscar-winning British film from 1997. Why is this a fun detail? Well, it follows a group of former steelworkers who, for economic reasons, start an all-male review that's eventually encouraged to show the full Monty. Miranda is sexually harassed by construction workers, which is such a cliche, but let's be real. One of the most popular and enduring characters for male strippers is a construction worker. Also, we see a poster for Wizard of Oz action figures, which were real and not great. But if you remember, there was a Wizard of Oz reference in the previous episode, so this kind of brings us full circle. Finally, the Blockbuster was located at 1253 Lexington Avenue. We can see the Carlo East Bar across the street, which is the only business still there after all these years. Also, this wouldn't be anywhere near the previously indicated neighborhood that Miranda was living in episode 6. Real quick, let's talk about Blockbuster because it was such a huge part of 90s culture that it would be weird to just ignore it. So I talked about Netflix in the pilot episode, but before Netflix, before streaming, there was Blockbuster. Sure, there were ways to rent videos, mostly at your local grocery store, convenience store, or independent retailer, but Blockbuster was the place we all went to rent new releases, classics, and really just fun for the whole family. They had popcorn, snacks, and candy, just like a movie theater, and they were an effective way to gauge the popularity of films once they were available for rental. We don't have enough time to go into Blockbuster's downfall. Instead, I'll point you to one of my favorites, Bright Sun Films, who very succinctly discusses it here. But they were just as ubiquitous as Starbucks in cities large and small. So everyone watching the show in the 90s knew the Blockbuster video box that Kevin held up earlier, as well as the quick return that Miranda used, and why she had to walk to the store and use reward points. Miranda confronts her harasser, and he demonstrates why the patriarchy harms everyone. He's married, so her aggression is the problem. Okay. She calls him a gavone, which is Italian slang for fool. How does Miranda know this term? Well, this is New York. It's implied that Miranda is Irish, and the Irish and Italians have been grouped together quite a bit throughout New York's history. Also, before we move on, Miranda is wearing a tote bag with Strictly Rhythm on it. Strictly Rhythm is an American house music record label. So is Miranda a closet house music fan? Are we still pretending she's not at least bisexual? Okay. This brings us to Samantha, who's chosen to channel her frustration at yoga. And yes, this is like trying to channel your sexual frustration through crypto trading. It's only going to benefit the man who scammed you. Anyway, Samantha chooses multiple yogasms in lieu of saving her soul. I think this is a real close-up of Anthony DeSanto's eyes, which are mesmerizing. We make our way to Charlotte's bedroom, where she learns what it's like to hook up with the guy after last call. She finds out she can't save him because he doesn't want to be saved. Carrie tells us, once Charlotte realized she couldn't get what she thought she didn't want, she couldn't imagine going on without it. And let's put a huge pin in this. So many lessons that should have been learned in this episode will come back to bite our women in the ass, but that's okay. Finally, Carrie admires her new kitchen color when Big finally comes to her. This is such a big deal, and his lack of presence in her apartment will continue to be a thing. It is worth noting here that they have had sex every time they spent the night together, for months apparently, but he's never been inside of her apartment. Anyway, he walks around and compliments the space, but she says, it's a mess. The floors need to be stripped and the curtains are... I want to change a lot of it. Again, no spoilers, but some fun foreshadowing here. Big asks about the other night. Carrie tells him, that was me, having a meltdown. And I love how we've seen a few meltdowns at this point, but yeah, let's pretend like this is the first. Again, put a pin in it. Big also gets distracted by the new neighbors, prompting Carrie to tell us and not him what's going through her mind.
We were all rooting for you! How dare you!
But Mr. Big finally decides to be sexy, and they kiss. Carrie says, and then he kissed me. Odd how normal can sometimes feel so uncomfortable. I don't know what's uncomfortable about this or why it's odd, but let's wrap things up. So, I have feelings about this episode. Most of those feelings will be saved for the season 1 retrospective, but when it comes to this episode, it's clear that it was written and directed by 3 men. While it is groundbreaking that toilet humor is at the center of Carrie's struggle, it's difficult to reconcile the romantic comedy trope of the man accepting her despite her flaws. But this entire episode is actually a rom-com reduced to 30 minutes. All of the women are robbed of their sexual agency because of a man, whether it's Mr. Big, Kevin, or Siddhartha. Sure, by the end of the episode, Carrie, Sam, and Charlotte, and arguably Miranda, reclaim their agency, but they were all still at the mercy of their partner. So let's talk about it. Carrie almost unwittingly entered the friend zone, which has typically been an infuriating designation that men obviously enter through no fault of their own. Charlotte thinks she's found a man who respects her, when in reality, he has no interest in sex at all and has no interest in ever having sex with her. Samantha hooks up with an egotistical fuckboy who has figured out a way to control women even further through a faux spirituality. And Miranda gets harassed by a married man who caves upon being confronted. All of these scenarios could be directed by Judd Apatow, or Donald Petrie, or Will Gluck, really any number of male rom-com directors. However, I do have to admit that not many female writers or directors do much better. I also want to point out that each of the men who were put in charge of this episode has a relatively good record of respecting his female characters. Sure, there are things I've criticized here, but that's pretty normal. My question is, as we get to the final episode of the season, why do we always put the onus on the woman to fix things in the relationship and not the man? Even when we have the opportunity to celebrate the woman's perspective, we strip her of her agency in order to ensure conflict. All of that being said, this episode sets up some things that we'll come to learn about each character. Miranda is a creature of habit. Charlotte will not settle for a sexless relationship. Samantha values orgasms, and Carrie needs to learn how to be comfortable with not being perfect. These traits will carry weight throughout the rest of the series, bringing us to the perfect time to end the episode breakdown. So that brings us to our BIPOC character count, which is still at 2, but that is the full breakdown of the 11th episode of Season 1 of Sex and the City, The Drought. Please like the video if you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time.